Hi, welcome to the show. My name is Jesse Goldberg, and you're watching Mind Your Own Music Business. And my special guest today is Professor Paul Fisher. And Paul is going to talk about the history of recorded music, which we have everywhere from the Edison cylinder to some kind of crazy cartridge to some kind of record. And we've known each other for a while, but I looked on the internet and I saw all this stuff that you've done. You got this thesis, you're like a PhD.
I am. I have a PhD in American Culture Studies, and I've been on the faculty at MTSU in the Department of Recording Industry for 17 years.
17 years, God.
One job.
But you had you had a thesis on rock and roll or something?
My master's thesis was called The Case for Scholarly Study of Rock and Roll, a Philosophy of Education. And I've been doing it for 17 years now, so I guess I was on to something.
So how did this start? I mean, you went to college and then you majored in what?
I was a radio, TV, film major in college because that was the closest thing I could get to a college subject that intersected with my passion for rock and roll and popular music.
Was that Northwestern?
Yeah, it was Northwestern, and the idea was that since that music was the content of radio, maybe they'd let me write about it a little bit, and they did. From there, I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, where I got my master's in popular culture studies, and there, popular music was a wide open subject. We were allowed to do whatever we wanted with it.
And then you had a PhD somewhere.
PhD also at Bowling Green in American Culture Studies, but that was a good 10 years later. I went back to Chicago and then moved to Los Angeles and was trying to crack a career in the entertainment industry, and teaching was always plan B.
So you're on plan B. So what
It's working.
Where are you from originally?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I've lived in Chicago, St. Louis, LA, Ohio.
But you grew up in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Well, you still got family there?
My mother, yeah.
Okay, now, you see that thing on his shirt right there? Can you get that thing on his shirt? The thing that you put in a 45, right. Now, what is that called?
That is called a 45 adapter.
It's called a 45 adapter?
You're jumping me into the middle of the history, but this is a 7-inch, 45 RPM record. Right. That was a format that was introduced in the 1940s by RCA.
There we go.
And the hole was so big that you could only play it on RCA equipment, which was RCA's intention. But some wise guy figured out that if you made a little less than a penny's worth of plastic that could clip into that hole, you could put it on a regular record player and play it on something that wasn't RCA.
But somebody asked me like, what was that called? And I was just saying, like,
it was an adapter so that you could play the big hold records on a regular
but they thought it had a name rather than an adapter.
No, that's the only thing I've ever heard it called.
Right. All right, so we're back to you, and all of a sudden you got this passion and interest, but you also collect a lot of records.
I do. I've got a pretty good collection at home, mostly LPs and 45s. That was the formats that were current when I was, most passionate and had the most money in my pockets that I could spend on things like records.
Right, and your favorite group?
I'm a Bruce Springsteen guy, probably more than anybody else, but I have a bias toward singer-songwriters and things with blues, with their roots in the blues.
Right, and what about what do you call it? The Beatles. I'm
a Beatles fan, but back in the day when I was a teen, I was a Rolling Stones guy. It used to be Beatles or Stones. You couldn't like both.
You were the evil part.
I tried to be.
Yeah. The Beatles were the nice guys.
That's right.
The Beatles. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing here.
Sure.
Now, you teach a course in something in history.
It's called History of the Recording Industry, and I work my way through the evolution of recording and playback technology and all of the different formats that were made available to consumers. But I also talk about the evolution of the music industry as a business and the evolution of American popular music as the content for all of this.
Within the same course?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's demanding.
Okay, so let's start talking about some of this stuff you brought here, which is the history of the recorded music as it,
Right.
Right, whatever it is.
Well, the first format was the Edison cylinder,
which is this thing in this case right here,
Yeah,
right?
these date till the 1870s. Right. Edison, as everybody knows, invented the phonograph.
This is a really weird type of thing.
It is. It mounted, the hollow part on the end there mounted over the machine. The groove is in the surface of the cylinder. And a needle was put in contact with the groove, and it rode it up and down.
Rode it up and down
to play the music.
Does it go
back.
around in a circle?
Yeah, the cylinder rotates and also moves laterally so that it's not playing over the same part of the groove over and over again.
It's kind of like a record, but it's the cylinder.
It is, and that's the thing. I mean, Edison gets credit for inventing the phonograph, but he did not invent the record player.
He invented the cylinder.
Right. The phonograph was a cylinder player.
Oh, you don't have a cap? This is picture on this thing here.
Yeah, to Edison it was more important. He thought it was more important for the sales that his name and his photograph be on it than the name of the musical artist or the number, the title of the selection.
How long did these last for? What year are we talking about?
Well, starting in the 1870s, and they were still used in dictation machines in the United States, at least until about the 1940s. But it was in the 1880s that a German immigrant...
1870s,
oh, yeah.
Say?
That's
that
when
long
it started.
ago?
Yeah.
Really? I thought it was like 1900 or something.
No, if you think about it, it's really short. It's only 130 years, 140 years.
Just that. That's that. What is this thing?
Okay, that is a 78 RPM disc.
This is the second thing that happened?
10-inch diameter. In the 1880s, a German immigrant to the United States by the name of Emil Berliner invented a machine that he called the gramophone. And he
Is this one that fits on a gramophone?
Yep, and it played the discs, which he called records from the very beginning. And because of various and sundry legal battles, they had to stop using the word gramophone, and that's when phonograph became a more generic term.
What's the matter with gramophone?
He was blocked by the courts from using the word, even though he made it up.
Why does it say Sears Roebuck on this?
Because the Silvertone label was owned and operated by Sears Roebuck.
Really? That's interesting. Where'd you get all this stuff from?
Oh, various and sundry flea markets
What
and places like that.
What came after the 78?
Well,
I'm not just 78, but this.
Well, the 78
what do they
RPM,
call this thing?
That's just a record.
But they called it something, an acetate? Or not an,
no, an acetate would be a test pressing.
What do they call these things? They're thicker than regular 78s.
Well, they're made with shellac.
All right,
but the next thing we would go with is the Edison disc.
Oh, the Edison disc came
because he realized
after?
The success of Berliner's machine
Where's this picture? Is this picture
was starting to cut into the sales of cylinders. So he developed a format also for flat records, and you might want to turn that sideways to the camera so people can see how thick it is.
Oh yeah, it is very
much
thick.
Thicker than the other 78.
Right, this is the one that plays on those crazy big machines.
Right, and Edison's groove still went up and down, but the groove in Berliner's disc goes side to side, so they were incompatible, like you said.
It does have a picture on it.
Of course it does, and his name's the biggest one on it.
Yeah, Edison, the Prisoner's Song.
Yeah.
But when did they start putting the songwriters in parentheses?
Not sure about that.
It's only one-sided, or
it's only, well, they started out one-sided. So did the discs for
what's next?
The gramophones. Well, in the 1940s, some of the more classical music-oriented fans in the business wanted to have longer playing formats than a 78 that only had 3 or 4 minutes on a side. Because if you're listening to a symphony,
so how long was the 78?
Ballpark of 4 minutes tops.
No, but how long was the 78 the standard?
Okay, until about the 1940s, because these classical music fans didn't want to have to get up and change the record 13 times to listen to a symphony.
1910 to 1940?
Well, I would say 1900 or 1890 to 1940.
Okay.
So in the 1940s, the Columbia Record Company came up with this.
Oh, this
Show them the cover
record
before you take the record out, though.
That's a gorilla.
Yeah, it's a gorilla playing an accordion, and the title is They Said It Couldn't Be Done.
You want to hear something sad?
Go ahead.
I have this record.
Okay. So this is the 12. Take it out of the sleeve, if you would, Jesse. This is the 12-inch.
This is the regular everyday record.
Long-playing micro groove record.
When did they start with these things?
It was introduced in 1948.
1948.
After World War II, and
Okay.
it has 20 to 23 minutes of playing time per side. So if you wanted to listen to a symphony that was 36, 40 minutes long, you only had to change the record once. You only had to interrupt.
What were the differences between the ones that came out in 1948 and the ones that came when they stopped making them? They were much thinner or something.
Well, the vinyl got cheaper. It was, they tried to maintain their profit margins that way, and by that time stereo had come in as well. These were all mono in the early days.
All right, stereo, when did that come in?
Stereo, again, after the war, I would say mid-50s or so. I remember when I started buying records in the late 1960s, they were selling mono and stereo LPs side by side.
And one was $1 more. Stereo was
$1 more, and then they phased that out.
Right.
So they tried to get the RCA company to record the back catalog of all their classical and opera stuff on the long-playing format. But David Sarnoff, who ran the company, didn't want to do that, and he got his engineers to come up with another format. And that's the 45 RPM
we showed
record.
this one before.
And that came in around 1949, 1950. But
about the same time LPs came in.
A little just after, right.
Right.
But it didn't have the duration of playing time. It had about the same as the LP.
Which sounds better, the 45 or the 30? And why? Oh, you know why? You know why they're 45 and 33? Somebody told me because they add up to 78.
That's good.
Somebody told me that.
Okay, well, 33 and a third is 100 after 3 minutes.
No, but 33 and 45 add up to 78. That's why they made it the 45 speed. I don't know where I got this from.
Okay.
But it was like Jeopardy or something.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah. That's how they discovered this stuff, 45 speed.
He wanted a new format that belonged to RCA by itself, and this is what his engineers came up with. And it has about the same amount of playing time as a 78. So it wasn't an alternative to the LP, but when kids got involved and really wanted to start buying records, the youth music in the 50s, this was the greatest thing. It was cheap. It was under $1. You got the song you wanted and another one on the B side, as we called it, the second side of the record.
Right.
And as I'm fond of saying, that was our download. It cost less than $1. It gave us the music we wanted, but it wasn't digital. It wasn't on the computer. We had to play it on a machine by putting a needle in the groove.
When I was buying records, it was 29 cents to 69 cents.
That makes you a little older than me, Jesse.
Yeah, I am. Oh well, what's next?
Okay, so that's kind of the progression through discs.
That's it?
Well, we got CDs.
Well, when did they stop making albums, even though they're still making them again? But
well, I don't think they ever fully stopped making them.
Well, when did that not become? It was like the 80s somewhere.
Well, CDs came in the 1980s, and the industry thought it was going to take about 10 years to make the transition from vinyl to CDs.
Way quicker than that.
It did, and here's the reason. The reason that record chains didn't want to bring in the CDs is because they would have to change all of their display racks. They didn't know how to display CDs most effectively. So what they did was they packaged them initially in these boxes that were called the long box.
I remember these things, long boxes.
And you could put two of those side by side in an LP rack and they fit just perfectly.
I wonder if these are collectible, the boxes itself.
Maybe, I suppose, but I'm not sure a lot of people would have kept them.
So you got this sealed.
Yeah, after a couple of years, somebody in the industry figured out that the reason the record company, you
could sell this one on eBay.
Chains weren't adopting the CD as fast as they wanted is because of this display issue. And somebody in the industry figured out that if they took the money that they were putting into the boxes and gave it to the record chains to buy new racks, they'd adopt the CD faster. Oh, so that initial 10-year projection on how long it was going to take the CDs to replace vinyl collapsed into about 5 years. And by 88, I think it was, CDs were outselling LPs in both volume.
You know what the crazy thing was? That CDs cost like half as much to produce, and they cost twice as much when they first came out.
Oh, the profit margin was ridiculous.
Right, they
That's
must have
why
been
the
making
industry
a
loved
fortune.
them.
Right.
Yes, they were.
And also, everybody was buying all their favorite albums on CDs,
even though they already owned them in the other format. Right.
Now, okay, before we go on.
Yep.
The big question: vinyl versus CD sound. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion?
Well, I'm very fond of vinyl, but I'm also happy to have my CDs. Unlike a lot of people, I did not buy things I had on vinyl on CD. I just kept buying and got new titles, and I never gave up my vinyl. And I'm very glad to see it coming back.
What about the sound, the difference between vinyl and CD? Somebody told me that the dynamics on the vinyl is more than the CDs. If you close my eyes, if I close my eyes and turn me around, blindfolded me, and let me hear a cassette, a CD, an album, or any other format, except for 78s, of course, most of the time I can probably not tell which is which, as long as it's not in the middle of the song.
Well, I found with CDs initially that I could hear things more clearly. Sometimes words came through more clearly out of the mix. A lot of times just it sounded cleaner and crisper, but some people find that cold. A lot of people like the warmth. That's the adjective you hear a lot about vinyl.
I think it's just because all the sound is mixed together more rather than separated. I don't know. This is my conclusion is that CDs sound better when they were made in the digital age, as opposed to the vinyl, as opposed to remastering some of the vinyl stuff. That's what I think.
But I think MP3 qualitatively is not nearly as good.
Right. Okay, which is next?
So we've kind of run through the history of discs. I didn't mention the one that's back here.
Oh, that's
a 16-inch diameter transcription disc. That's how they broadcast radio programs that weren't live. They could do them live once, cut them direct to disc, and then use the discs to play the same show in the Western time zones. 16 2/3. That's half of 33 1/3.
Right. So we got 16 2/3. We have 33 1/3. We have 45. We have 78.
Yep. But not all at once, because that would have been real confusing to the consumer.
Right. Okay. I never bought one of those. I mean, I've had them before, but I've never actually bought them. Okay. Now, what is?
Let's talk about tape.
Tape.
That's the thing that really changes things.
I do.
Tape had been around before World War II, but it was during World War II that the American forces found that the Germans had much higher quality machines than we did. So a guy named John T. Mullen, or Jack Mullen, who worked for the Signal Corps, sent home a bunch of reels of German tape and a couple of German machines in pieces, both to his bosses at the Signal Corps, and he sent them home to himself. And when he got back to San Francisco after the war, he reassembled the machines, put the tape in, and started recording soundtracks for the corporate and industrial films that his employer was making. And he was the first to edit sound for film. And once the movie studios and the TV networks found out about it, or radio networks rather than TV, they pulled him into Hollywood, and he started working with Bing Crosby on his radio show. Because Crosby was one of the first to figure out that if they could do a good rehearsal during the week that was recorded, they didn't have to come in and do the show live on Saturday evening. They could piece together all of the good stuff they did during the week, and he could be back on the golf course by Thursday.
Oh, so that's why tape came in?
And it was quality, it was convenient.
It's very good quality. When I was a kid, I used to have a reel-to-reel tape machine, and I taped everything from my records onto the tape so the records would stay in perfect condition.
And of course, it started out monaural. It was only one track. Then when stereo came in, it was 2 tracks. But that built up.
This is 7 and this was 7 and something and 3 and something?
Well, it was inches per second in the transport speed of the tape. Most recordings were made, I think, at 7 1/4.
Right, and there was a 15 that was a better,
because
quality.
You would get better quality results.
We'll put this back later because I got messed
No worries.
up. Okay, and then after reel-to-reel, they had what? Cassettes or 8-tracks?
Well, they tried to sell the consumer pre-recorded reels, which they didn't want. They were too unwieldy. They would never became a mass format. So in the late 1950s, RCA introduced the first, just tip it out.
I've never seen
Introduced
this
the first cartridge tape format, and this is the
looks like a
RCA
big
1950s format. I call them cassettes on steroids. And you could buy a machine that would record them. They sold blank tapes as well. They weren't two-sided, they were one-sided, but you could rewind them, record over them,
have never
things
seen
of that
this.
nature.
When did these come out?
Again, late 1950s.
And how long did they last for?
I would think less than 5 years. I don't think it really caught on.
Yeah, I've never seen it before. But it looks like I guess that's what they got the eyes for cassettes for, because it looks like a cassette.
Sure, and that's where we're pretty much where we're going next.
Cassettes or 8-tracks?
8-tracks first. Well,
8-tracks.
8-tracks and cassettes actually were introduced in the same year.
Really? What year was that?
1966.
I didn't know that.
They were both introduced at the Consumer Electronics Show that year, but the cassettes did not sound nearly as good. The cassette tape is 1/8 of an inch wide, and the 8-track tape is 1/4 of an inch wide, so it could store a bit more information.
Storing more information, that would make the quality better for some reason?
Right, that's the idea. And with an 8-track tape, you have 4 stereo programs. And they run parallel to each other on the surface of the tape. The tape is a loop, and it would loop through the first program, and then the machine would have to switch to the second program, and then it would go around the loop and do that again and again.
In the middle of the song, it would stop.
Yeah, they weren't particularly well engineered sometimes at the beginning, and you'd buy an 8-track and find out that a song you knew really well had a part 1 and a part 2, and you're like, oh good, I'm going to hear a part 2, that's something new. But it was just that they ran to the end of the program, so they would fade it out, the machine would change, and then it would resume. It would fade back in, and it would just be the same song.
Now these people had 8-track machines in their cars all the time.
Right. That was part of the convenience of 8-tracks. It was the first format that really let us take our music wherever we wanted to go. Right. And if you were a rich kid, you could have a machine that recorded 8-tracks, so you really could make mixtapes on 8-tracks.
But for some reason, in the early cars, they had 8-track machines and no cassette machines.
Right.
And I don't know why.
Again, because initially the 8-track sounded so much better. When Dolby Noise Reduction came in and made the cassette sound as good or better than the 8-tracks, then that's when cassettes moved past 8-tracks and really started taking over the market.
Also, cassette, the 8-tracks never last the test of time. The thing on the top always
things would break off, or the lubrication would dry out and it wouldn't move. But one of my favorite things in high school, I had a buddy who had a car. The faster the car went, the faster the tape went.
Oh, that's funny.
So you heard some really interesting sounds that way.
But cassettes were around for a long time, though. They were a very accepted method.
Yeah, they lasted longer than the LP. I mean, when they phased out vinyl, cassettes were the format for singles, for kids to hear the top 40 songs.
That didn't work too well, though, did it?
If you were of the right age, it sure did.
Cassette singles?
But then CD singles came in after them.
They called them singles.
Some did, yep. The industry certainly did.
Okay, what's next?
Actually, I think we're kind of getting into the digital era from there, because it was LPs.
Does that mean there's nothing?
Cassettes. Forgive me, I didn't bring enough.
No, but does that mean there's nothing? Digital era means there's.
Well, it means CDs. You know, and
Oh,
then,
we got CDs?
and then obviously MP3s. Well, I've
we don't
got
have
the
to
ones
show-
in the boxes.
we don't have to
right.
show CDs.
Hopefully the consumer knows what
Right,
a CD
okay.
is.
So after CDs, now there's nothing, right? Now there's MP3s.
Now it's digital, it's MP3, and you know, I think that's part of why vinyl is coming back with young people. They've grown up with music, and there's nothing tangible. There's nothing to hold. There's no good art to look at. There are no liner notes to tell them more about the artist and the music. And also, finally, mom and dad have given up their record collections, so the kids
people like
they
us
can be
are buying
cool all
them.
over again.
Right, that's true. I went into a store the other day and I saw a 13-year-old, and I pointed to James Taylor. I said, "You know who that is?" He says, "No." And I pointed to Jimi Hendrix. "You know who that is?" "No." And I said, "What? Do you like the Beatles?" Everybody likes the Beatles. Isn't that amazing how the Beatles have transcended generations?
Yeah, I heard Paul McCartney was in a group before Wings.
Yeah, I get it. So where are we going next?
Well, you know, it's just interesting.
Are we going
me.
backwards? What are we doing? Is there going to be another format? Because I personally think that people are going to want to hold on to something.
Mm-hmm. Well, vinyl is one of the few segments of the recorded music industry right now that's growing. They actually sold more last year than they did the year before, and it's becoming a trend. It's still less than 2% of the overall volume of what the industry sells, but it's becoming healthier. A lot of groups that, you know, put their new record out on vinyl now are selling 15, 20,000 copies in the first week.
And they're selling
on
it for
vinyl.
a lot of money too. They're not selling
They
it for
are.
$5. It's like $20.
And that's right. So,
$25 or something.
and they're also reissuing and repressing classic records on vinyl now, and sometimes those can be 35, 40 bucks a piece.
Yeah, what's the deal with this 180 grams? Does that make it sound better or not?
Well, a lot of times in the 70s and 80s, especially when oil prices went up, because vinyl is a petroleum-based product, they tried to use less and less vinyl. They tried to make it cheaper and cheaper to maintain their profit margins. So part of what the new vinyl pressing outlets are doing is saying, we're giving you top quality. This is heavier than the original issue would have been back in the early 70s or
Is heavier
early
going to make
80s.
it sound better, or just be a more sturdy product?
Well, it's a more sturdy product, and you get less bleed through from one groove to the next, so you get a more distinct sound out of them, I think. They do sound really good.
Yeah. I got a bunch of them, but I usually don't listen to them because usually they're sealed and I want to sell them.
Sure.
So what do you think about the future? You think it's going to be some product, or you think it's going to be, well, I mean, if you knew the future, it'd probably be.
Well, it's like John Lennon said, you know, if we knew what it was all about, we'd find another group and be managers. You know, I'm a college professor. I'm not getting rich doing what I do, but, you know, I look at what's happening in the industry and we see what the patterns have been in the past. And, you know, the thing that I see that's very different right now is that you pay more now for access than ownership. So you have
that's
an
interesting,
ISP bill, you have a cell phone bill, you have a cable TV bill, and all of that is access to content. And as long as you can get what you want to hear or what you want to see when it's convenient for you, you don't have to have a copy on the shelf anymore. You know, Spotify and the new iMusic service, the iTunes radio kind of thing that they're doing now, that's all about access. People can pay a flat fee and stream all the music they want, download some, you know, to have the file on their computer if they want it. So that's, I think, the biggest difference. People don't really feel the need to have a physical copy of everything on the shelf anymore. The technology is moving us toward any content, anywhere, anytime, as long as you're paying the bills for the access.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I kind of feel that as a human being, they usually like to hold on to something. You know, I'm at McKay's bookstore all the time, you know, and they're crowded all the time. Mm-hmm. And they sell CDs, they sell, you know, cassettes, they sell records, they sell DVDs, they sell VHS tapes, you know.
Oh yeah, no, physical media is not going to go away. People still use it, people still like it. I don't think people our age are buying as much new media, but that secondhand market, you know, it's thriving. Places like McKay's, flea markets, record shows, things like that.
Right.
There's one every weekend somewhere.
Right, yeah. Well, vinyl it's amazing. I never thought that this would ever happen. In a million years that vinyl would come back.
Oh, when I started accumulating vinyl 10 years ago, because I was just finding such great things, I was completely wrong. Well, more like 15 years ago. But the world's catching up, and you know, vinyl is definitely making a comeback. People are really interested in it. Some people are very passionate about it.
Yeah. Well, we just have a few minutes left here. What else did we not talk about?
I think we've actually gotten through all of the different formats. I guess The other thing to think about with the music industry is that, with the possible exception of Warner Records, which is now owned by a guy named Len Blavatnik, who was originally from Russia but lives in the United States, all of the major record companies are foreign owned.
Is that true?
They've all been sold off. Sony's Japanese, Bertelsmann is German, EMI was British, and it's moved around a bit. It's and we cannot expect the big music companies to make decisions about what's good in American music or what's going to be best for the evolution of American popular music. They're still about trying to sell units. They don't care what the content is unless it gets them into trouble.
So Paul, my interest in music has kind of waned a little, because of my age or something, I don't know. But why do you think people are so passionate about music?
People get passionate about music because it moves them emotionally, intellectually, but it's also because it's something that is current. It's happening now. People are creating it, putting it out for us to hear. The artists behind the music are trying to tell us things they're seeing and feeling about our world. And when they share that with us, we get a better sense of what we believe about the world, and it helps our culture evolve. It helps everybody move forward into a future that's largely unknown.
Well, what's your favorite type of music?
My favorite type of music, I think, is something that stimulates my head more than my heart. But I also, in certain circumstances, prefer stuff that just gets me moving, getting me up and dancing.
Oh, I'm like you. The head part's very, very well said. Anyway, we've got to get going. My name is Jesse Goldberg. The show is Mind Your Own Music Business. This is Professor Paul Fisher at MTSU, and we'll be back next week with another edition of the show.